Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Daze, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin. And my guest for this one is going to be refrezh, who was most recently obviously in Heroic. Now he's in Sprout. He's actually qualified to the major, so obviously it's something we'll get to later on. Right, refrezh, I want to actually start just by asking you about one of your really old teams. Because I did notice, if you go back, you're one of the people who've been around the scene longer than maybe people know you. But the team I actually remember seeing you on first, because I was actually working at this event, was on the Fragsters team when you went to that Star Series. Now, what people might not know about this team is, first of all, we'll talk about it in a minute, but there's some interesting teammates that are on that team who obviously went on to be quite famous as well. But this team, the reason I bring it up is this was the Star Series at the end of 2018, which people might remember was won by Ents before everyone knew Ents was good. This is before they did all those major runs and all that stuff the next year. And it was the one where at this tournament, like a lot of the big teams didn't go, but there were actually some big teams on paper, like Mouse Sports was there and North and a bunch of other squads. And your team, even though you only made quarterfinals in this tournament, actually 3-0 or maybe 3-1 to the Swiss system. You had like a really good run. Yeah. And when you go look who you played, you just played like all the best teams in the tournament. You were like playing Big and North, and like it's just everyone good. Gambit, like all the names people would know. So at the time, your team this was like a breakout moment. I thought like a bunch of these names, like I said, did go on to bigger things. Do you remember this tournament? Do you remember this era and this team?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember this quite clearly. It was just after the summer break that we qualified for the event, and this was by far the biggest tournament we have played in at this point of time. And we actually had a goal that we really wanted to reach playoffs, and we had a really shallow map pool back then. Right. So what we did was like only preparing for the best of one. So we only played like 3 or 4 maps in practice for 2 months even, and then we just like hard practice for this tournament. And I mean we reached our goal, and but in the playoffs we had no chance because we were always one map behind. So it was a really nice event, kind of us showing us on the map more, because we were mostly a DreamHack open team doing well. So it was really nice competing against the best of the best.
Now, it's funny because on this particular team, I remember the player who got the hype, and later in Mad Lions he was getting the hype. So it was actually Bobski. This was the person that people thought was going to be like a potential like star player one day. Obviously, people will know now, like they know him, but they only sort of know him from that stupid story where he was on the bench of Astralis and then he never really got his shot. And then bizarrely, like he's sort of semi-retired now, or he's not going to play. Right? Who was Bobski back then?
I mean, Bobski was definitely one of the best teammates I've played with. He's a really good player to play like more what you call loose CS. He's really good at playing on the fly and doing moves. And back then our team was a really loose team, so him having having him on the team was really crucial. It also kind of killed our team that he decided to leave.
Okay.
So he was a really good part of the team because he was, in my eyes, irreplaceable. We tried to look for people to take his place, but there wasn't really anyone who could do half the job that he did. So he was a really valuable player on the team back then.
And then the other guy I want to ask about is, of course, Stown, who was on this team. But at the time, it's funny, in Heroic, obviously now people would have said he's the star player and he's had very good stats and he gets on those top X lists at the end of the year. But was he actually as good back then? Was he someone that was obviously a talent? Was he not as good back then? What was Stown's status back then? I'm sure he's way younger.
I mean, Stown's status has always been that he's the most talented player in Denmark, but back then, of course, he wasn't as complete as a player as he is now, and as a mature player. But the talent was undoubtedly there. Of course, it was easy to see. We also had a bit of a weird team, I would say, because we had many good /star players in the team who were able to take over the server. So it was just something where it changed from game to game or month to month who had like their good periods, and we were also really flexible with positions. So sometimes it would just be, let's try something new and try to switch up the position, and then suddenly another guy steps up to the table. So it was really a nice and easy team to play in. Not a lot of pressure. We could just, practice a little bit, and we would do like great stuff. I like that team was always a favorite team of mine, just because how stacked the lineup actually was. I saw it pretty like early on, but I guess the rest of the team didn't see what I saw. But I knew that this team would be something special, and I'm quite sad how things ended because I think we could have expanded our run for a long time and been one of the best teams in Denmark.
Since obviously you've gotten to play with Stown in Heroic in later years when he's many years older and like I say his status has gone up in the world, what type of player did he develop into? How do you describe Stown as a player?
I would describe him as a player who is doing a lot on the server. He's really good at mid-run calling and also reading the game. And he's a player who is having impact while he's alive, but also a lot when he's dead, when he's like trying to micromanage people and help with information and just doing a lot of moves on the map that gives us a lot of info. I feel like it's like one of his strengths, and also being able to coordinate and actually call a lot of stuff. I think most of our CSIs in Heroic were mostly kind of set up by him in the bigger picture, and he was really good at making sure that, you know, for example, on Inferno, that there's a good flow on B side and A side, kind of, because he was really good at playing B and getting banana, getting info, giving information over to A. Hey, not a lot of pressure on B, be careful of A, and it would just make our job on A so easier. So he's a really controlling type of player now. But back then he was quite loose and super aggressive. I mean, we even made some jokes when we looked at the stats, like the past 3 months stats, and his death per round was like 0.74 or 5.
That's very high.
Yeah, so that was really high because he always like he was never settled with just giving or just getting like 1 kill or 2 kills. He always went for another. So he died basically like every round. And we were kind of talking, hey, Stown, maybe you should try to like chill a bit when you get that first kill sometimes. So sure. He has developed into a really mature and superstar player. He doesn't have this flaw of dying around. He's really good at knowing, you know, when enough is enough. So in my eyes, he's like one of the best and smartest player I've ever played with.
I'm sure the next event I want to ask you about is the one where actually most people know your name from, which is when you got to stand in last minute for that Cloud9 lineup and you went to the Blast in the Lisbon one. It was on in Portugal. So if people don't remember, this was the one where it was the time period when they were going through all those weird international lineups in Cloud9, and different people for different reasons at different times had to be unavailable to play, and they never really got like the proper lineup going. So you came in for this event as like a standard as far as I know. And at this tournament, if people don't know, it was kind of actually a one where the team could have done even better. If everyone remembers, the old format of Blast was you played a BO1 against everyone, and then the top 2 placed teams played the final. And actually Cloud9 in this tournament, you were tied with Na'Vi to potentially go to the final, but the problem is they'd beat you head to head. But in this tournament, you guys beat MIBR, you beat FaZe Clan, I mean, it's an enormous team, and it beat NIP. So these were all like known squads. What was this experience like? Like, how did you get into this team? Were you really just called up last minute? How did you get the call up?
I mean, I actually got the call up for the event prior to that. For Blast Copenhagen, but I didn't check my social medias for some hours because I was just like playing, and then it was too late because Valence already played a game, and the Blast admins wouldn't like change with 2 stand-ins suddenly. So I actually had the offer earlier, but unfortunately I couldn't attend to Blast Copenhagen. But at Lisbon they just did it a week before or something, the event, and we had that boot camp for 2 days or something from Copenhagen, and yeah, that was basically it. So it was kind of last minute, but I mean, a week before event is not that much time.
What would you say the experience was like? Because obviously, like, so if people don't know, sometimes you do get these weird honeymoon like runs, even when they're standing. Because in some ways, sometimes when you have a stand-in, you just maybe play a bit looser, or you give them your spots. So did people set you up for spots? Did you have to play? I think it was Golden. Maybe you were playing. Did you play Golden spots? How did it work?
I mean, I mostly played Golden spots on the CT side, and on T side, I took a lot of leg positions because that's also what I was used to. And I think the reason was, I think Flusher was doing these leg positions on T, but he had to be in-game leader, so he was more in the map control, so it makes sense. But on CT side, I was like playing BF's Mirage. I mean, I had tried it before. Of course, not the position you're gonna shine the most in, but I actually did a okay job there. So it was some new roles and not my best wishes, but I just took it as an experience because I have never played in such a big event or with such good players before that I would be stupid for me to not take the chance.
After this, one of the teams that I actually thought went a bit under the radar. I mean, even though the name of the team's an enormous team, it's Optic Gaming, obviously. But if people don't know, it's that weird period where they were like being bought by like Immortals, the team that then owns MIBR. And it was like some period where it wasn't quite like the American Optic. It was like some other company. And the thing about this squad is when you go back now, mate, I mean, obviously part of it's because some of you have gone on to bigger things. If you go back now, the roster looks amazing. It was a config MSL, so they're already really well-known names. You, Nico with a small K, the one who was in North as well, and then obviously Tessus at the time nobody knew, but I mean turned out to be pretty good as well, and obviously was in later teams. So when you look back now, like this project could have been a lot better maybe than it was, right?
Yeah, I think the whole Optic team, like there was like many players like out and in because of when I joined the team, Snappy was the in-game leader.
Right.
And then a couple months later was Ismail, and
yes, that's
it was
right.
just a really confusing team, I would say, and I think it was just really badly managed. And it's kind of unfortunate because, I mean, if you look at the caliber of all the players, I mean, just if you look at the list, when I joined, it was like HMB, Yugi, Config,
Sure.
Snappy. And then they replaced some players, and Nico, MSL, and Tessus got in later into the picture. And it was just like a lot of switcheroo with the lineups, and it just doesn't really give you any consistency. I would also say that some of the players were probably not in the right mind mentally with where their career was and how they should behave. Or I also think I was highly misused on that team. I was like, this is a general problem with most of the teams, that I'm really misunderstood as a player, and it's
They seem
really
to
hard.
think sometimes you're an entry or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, like in the beginning, I was like a lot of entry, but I mean, I don't really mind entering. I like to play fast and do moves, and my roles have just changed a lot from team to team based on what the team already has and what they need. And then I'm always kind of the last person to join and have to like adapt to whatever's needed. And I am just the type of player who would just do anything for the team. I have the mentality of getting the results, and I don't really care about stats or that kind of stuff, because I'm quite versatile. So whatever gets the job done, I'm happy with. If someone else is that doesn't like bother me. Whatever.
What do you think? What do you think is the best setup though? What makes Refrezh look the best he can look?
If you want getting the most out of me, you need to put me in positions where I can be more vocal and have a lot of control, and having the freedom, but I will also say the responsibility of some bomb sites, some areas of the map, and I would say also trust. I mean, I guess every player needs some trust in what they do, and I think one of the biggest problems with younger talents in the scene is that if they're not used right, or if they're misunderstood as how they are as players, they're just going to be used wrong. And we are seeing many examples of players who we thought would be the next star or become a really good player, and they just kind of fade away in a way where you're like, what even happened to this guy? Because they were playing really good for a long period of time, and then suddenly they just crash and you never hear them again. And I think many of that comes from players being misused or something else. I'm not sure exactly, but at least I can just talk by experience what happened to me.
I don't know how much you want to say, but when you were saying earlier that some of the players, you know, like maybe weren't in the right headspace and maybe it wasn't like maybe they were a bit naughty or whatever. Like one of the names that's obviously in the news at the moment, but I know these stories behind the scenes. I know some of the players. Like this is one of the periods that was probably the worst part of Config's career. This was when, like, I remember, put it this way, I remember one time like flaming Snappy and being like, he doesn't use him right. Like this could be one of the best players in the world. And I basically heard later, like, mate, he's sort of like out of control right now and he's not really practicing. and he's not really a guy who's like just trying to be the best player, and so we're just doing like whatever makes sense in the game at the time with him. And so, maybe he doesn't want to be the star, maybe he doesn't want all the game around. So what was it like? Obviously, I think he's himself been quite open about this since that this was a period where he had to get his head together. People know he came back in a big way, the complexity lineup. What would you say about being Config's teammate at this time? Sounds like it might have been a bit tricky.
I mean, to be honest, I felt like he was the least of the problems on the team, because I felt like just his individual skill. I mean, I've never seen a guy have that much skill in game, because basically I felt like all the practices that we had, he just were like running around and just had like 40 kills all the time, and it was like every eco he would just buy deagle and go out and kill 2 or 3 guys. I mean, I felt like individually like he was there. I just felt like the whole setup around the team were off. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I felt I was not used right and not heard on the team, because I had some opinions, but they were not like listened to. And I also know for a fact that Snappy was not comfortable either. So I just think the whole setup was bad, but being Config's teammate was incredible. I mean, just to spectate, because when I was there, I was just looking at him and he would just pull off some bullshit. I mean, I feel like you're not supposed to get away with stuff he's getting away with, but he's just like that talented. And it's just crazy to me what he can do inside the server.
Since you got to play under both of these IGLs in this team, as you said, Snappy and MSL, how would you explain both of them? How are they different? What are they good at?
I mean, it was quite a short tenure with Snappy. We only played 1 tournament together and some online stuff. So it wasn't really that many matches. And I feel like it's really unfair for me to judge by that period, because we also had some discussion where I explained to him that I don't feel comfortable, and then he's explained to me that he doesn't feel comfortable either. So it's like 2 persons who doesn't like enjoy playing in that kind of team. And I think, I mean, I tried to tell him that, hey mate, whatever you do, I just want you to have the full control, and I really wanted him to have the chance of like leading this team, because I never felt that he did. But I told him that, I mean, whatever you say, I'll do it. And of course, I also told him I was uncomfortable with the positions, but we couldn't change that. So I really wanted the rest of the team to believe in him as I did, but unfortunately, that's not how things turned out, and there was a change. But with MSL, and I learned how structured you can actually play, because I came from Fraxas that was quite loose, and then there was like this thing where, okay, there's a lot of rounds that were set from spawn, the defaults were made in a way where the grenades you had to use were sometimes limited, that you cannot always just use all your grenades if you feel like it. You have to, what do you call, save it for later into round. So we have some executes that we could like do. I really learned how a T-side can feel so easy to execute, because in fact it was always like really chaotic, and you really had to like pull a rabbit out of a hat sometimes, because you were just so limited on nades and you had to make a fast plan. But in Optic it was like really easy, because everything was just set and you knew your role, you knew what you had to do. I always wanted to like expand that play style, but we never got the time, and again, I felt like I was not really listened to, but I really tried to come in with a lot of ideas. I remember I tried to add in, now on Nuke, you see all these kind of like different walls on Nuke. And I saw like back then, okay, Mousesports, they're actually doing 2 or 3 different walls. And I thought, okay, it could actually be nice to have some different variations. But we didn't implement that, because we felt like, okay, it's better just to have 1 wall and just some variations, so you could just put the same and they wouldn't know where you go. But I was like, I mean, we should be looking at the better teams to learn from them. So I mean, I had a lot of ideas, but I never had the space or the trust in doing so. So it was quite frustrating, I would say, even though I really enjoyed how easy the T-sides were to play.
One of the events in this team, which, like, again, it's not like a huge moment maybe for all CS fans, but when you go back and look now, when you won the DreamHack Summer event with Optic, when you look back now, mate, like some of these teams that people just didn't know they were that good, like the Trick lineup is the one that became Mad Lions not that long afterwards and became pretty good. The Vanguard team is basically everyone except, I think, Adren or something, and they actually obviously went to the final of the next major. You had the Crazy lineup, which were the people who actually were doing pretty decent at that major too, and it was Hunter and all those Nexa, who all went to G2 later. Actually, winning this event's like probably better than people realise. Like, but was it when you're in your career, right? Do trophies matter even if they're not the biggest? Is it like significant to win an event like this?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that like every trophy matters because you never know if it could be your last one. So I'm always in to like enjoy the movement and always to celebrate the victories you get because you never know when it's gonna be your last. So for me, this trophy was really important to like win a international event with some good teams. I was quite sad actually that the Vanguard team they went on to do the major run before we met them because it was like only a month later that they went to the final of the majors or something like that. Yeah, so I mean, it would have been more badass to say, "Oh, we actually beat Vanguard," but yeah, I mean, it did feel great for sure. It was also, I think, I had like a sick highlight that one before something in the final that I mean just gave me more confidence in my own clutches. So I mean, like overall, I would say it was a nice event. We didn't. I don't think any of the games were like that close. Like really tight with 3 maps. Maybe against Tricked actually. When I think back, I think they actually pushed us to the limit, but the final were not that hard.
I saw after this, the problem is you got replaced by Cajun B, who got brought back into the lineup, right? Look, people are going to know, obviously, he's played with Config, with MSL, like they're former teammates of his. Was it really just the case of like they just wanted their old teammate back? Did they think you were playing badly, or what was the story? Why were you replaced?
I had a call with MSL and basically what he told me was just that they needed more maturity on the team. Because we were like many young guys on the team. I know Config is not that young, but he's like really energetic and not the most mature player. Not in a bad way. He's just like a really fun guy who likes to have fun and always like super hyped. And they kind of needed someone who's more experienced and chill and able to like calm things down when they get heated. And I wouldn't say back then I was probably not the person to do it, but I mean, I do see a way where it makes sense. But to be honest, I was not really that sad about getting benched because I wasn't really happy in that team due to not having the roles or the impact I would like to have in the way, and I didn't feel like the other guys were doing enough in the roles. I felt like they had to either work harder or play some other position that suited them better. It gave me opportunity to like get some reflection and be ready for the next step in my career.
After this, later, skip forward a bit, you obviously were in the Copenhagen Flames team, where you also were paired with Tessus again, and also Farley was there, people don't know. Right, since you've been in a few of these different teams with Tessus, I do remember in Optic when he initially came in, there was a bit of hype actually. I remember he had a few like highlights or whatever. After this though, I remember when you guys were at Flashpoint, no one was hyping anyone on this team. Like, these were all like forgotten players, and the joke is, now everyone who's seen Heroic's going to go, oh, Tessus is really good. Like, no one was mentioning his name back then. Who is this guy? Like, was he actually always a skilled player? Like, what type of player would you say he is?
He's a type of player who will always improve. He's really methodical with everything in his life, from his game to his daily life, how he's planning it, how he's doing his work. But also he's like really talented, and like especially with his like first bullet accuracy, I would say. Like, he's not going around like one-saving people in that way, but like when he's like taking a duel, then the burst of his spray is always like hitting the head in the first few bullets, and it's just really key in the positions and roles that he has when he's like doing a lot of entry and map control. That he's like really like dangerous player to face, because I mean, if you don't really kill him, or flash him with an AWP, it's I think 70-30 to his favor in the most duels, because he can be really really instant, I would say, with his first bullet. But I mean, as you said, I played with him over like 3 times over different time periods, and the first time he was like a young kid just getting into a bigger team, playing lanes, and he was of course nervous and shy. But then the second time around, he has like matured a bit, got some confidence, because he kind of tried a little bit in uptake, and he was like playing really good in flames. So he kind of knew, okay, I'm this type of player. I know what I can do. And then the third time around on the heroic, it was like he has like humbled down a bit, but still really confident in the way he plays. But he was like really eager to learn and like improve. I felt like every day were just it seemed like that every day he was like either improving or maintaining. Like I never feel like he got into a period where he was in a slump or whatever. I felt like he was like really consistent, and I think he's like one of the most consistent teammates I've ever had, and he's always like doing his job, I would say.
As I mentioned, another teammate crucially on this team, because this is one of the first places this guy got known, was Farley, which, by the way, is apparently I've been told how you say Farley, so I'm trying to say it correctly where possible. Not trying to have another Zipnix incident like we had all those years ago, where we just got it wrong and said it too many times. It's too late now. We can't delete it and go back and have Zipnix. It's over, mate. So on this particular player, one of the reasons I want to ask about him as well is because sadly his most fame has come now in Astralis, and unfortunately, because of the whole narrative of like everyone wants Device to join again, like all they basically do, fans, is just hate on him. They like just the whole time say you're not Device, which you're never going to be. And so I don't think anyone talks about his upside. Now people might know he did have a pretty good period when he was in that like Godsent FPX team. That was kind of where he got his chance from. But this is where you played with him years earlier in some of these lineups. So who is Farley, and like maybe give us some idea of like what this guy's skill set is?
I mean, I can only speak about when I played with him, because I felt like when I played with him, it was also with Hooksy back then, and we were like, in a way, a trio where we always worked a lot and we all understood each other. Me and Farley, like I think he's like one of the players that I had like this affinity with, where you can't really explain it, but it's just there where we just always understand each other, and it's just super easy to play. To play with him, because I know when he wants something, and he knows when I want something. Sometimes we don't even have to say something to each other. We just know what we should do. So it was really nice to play with him, because we had the same ideas and philosophies, and we enjoyed playing with each other. And he's really good at being proactive and communicate a lot. Device were always praised by his teammates and in general in Denmark that he can frag, of course, but he's also really good at supporting and setting his teammate up with the AWP. And this is one of the things where I think he was like really good at too, that he were really good at telling people what to do too, because sometimes AWPers, they can be a bit focused and zoned out and just only think about their zoom. But he was really good at moving and talking and being really versatile on the map. And I think that's what I think kind of stopped him a bit, that he doesn't have it. Like it doesn't seem to me that he plays the same way. Seems like he's kind of playing certain positions and one area of the map. But when I played with him, he was just all over the map, and he did whatever he wanted. Of course, not skill set or level wise, but just positionally, he reminded me of Simple, because you never know where Simple is. He's all over the map, and I think this is a really strong thing to do as an AWPer. And I think he's like one of the best AWPers I played with, because I felt like he was good at rifling, but the AWP for him was like, I felt like he was running more than holding angles, and that seemed a bit bizarre to me. But it worked out like really great for him, because he was good at taking space with it too. And yeah, I think that's at least one of the problems Astralis has, like with taking map control, is not that fluent for them, it seems like.
when you came with Huxley and went to the Mad Lions team, and obviously you came to our Flashpoint tournament, like this is the one where I always tell people, because Virtus.pro won this tournament, like the real what if moment in this tournament was in the match that you guys had against them, because you had one of the most ridiculous ones where like the Joker would be like, I'd have to compare it to like, I don't know, scoring an own goal in football or something, because basically this game on the third map was done. Like you were in the winning position and you did like a push on train into the back alley, and obviously like this is one of those times where like I can't remember specifically, but I think like Jim was sat there in an off angle or something. It's one of those ones where, you know, like, I mean, this is a part of what I want to ask you about. It's not just the idea of like, did you mess up the round? Like that seems obvious, but the problem I think back then is, remember, this is early on in like Virtus.pro again being a good team with your Kindar stuff. People don't know they're probably one of the most tricky teams ever to play against, right? Like that style is really infuriating. Like you might think you can push, you might think you can get behind them or flank, but the problem with James is you never know when he's on that corner, do you? You never know when that team's sort of waiting and running the clock down. So give me your thoughts on this, because obviously this moment could have turned the whole tournament around, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was just so annoying because we were like in a 5v3, and I was like, okay, we were CT, and I was like, okay, the T's, they have to do something, and I felt like, okay, if he's not doing something Ivy now or Ellie, then he's probably not there. And it was just super stupid, but he was just hiding. And I was like, I mean, if like I had the feeling like afterwards where it's one of the most stupid rounds, because it would just be like, if I just unplugged my keyboard, we would just have won the round, kind of.
Sure.
And
yeah.
and that just seems so crazy to me that I'm playing against a guy who would lose if I didn't have a keyboard, and they are just playing so much based off people's mistakes that it's to the extreme where I'm like, you're not even trying to grab an opportunity to win the game. You're like just gambling it all on the other team making the mistake. And I mean, yeah, I hated myself after that round, but I'm still in shock that it happened, because I remember it was Sanchi, just sitting and waiting.
There you go.
But I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, it was the whole VP team. And I also saw, like, I remember back in the days where I was like watching a stream of a game on Dust 2 where they were like 2v5 retaking B on Dust 2, but they didn't even try, and it was the last round of the game. They were just FK. Yeah, I mean, I've seen at least 3 or 4 rounds of them where they're not even going for the round, and it's the last round of the game, and I just really don't understand it, because like they're just standing outside of tunnels. Like he has pushed all the way along and just standing outside of tunnels, but not even going into tunnels and trying to retake B. He's just standing there, just holding for exit when it's the last round of the game. And I mean, that might be too extreme, but there is some really frustrating factors to their playstyle, because you're just thinking to yourself, I could just unplug my keyboard and they wouldn't have a chance. And yeah, it was one of the worst rounds I've ever played, I think.
One of the things about this team was, funnily enough, this guy himself's qualified to the major. He was looking awesome. Obviously, Acor was in this Mad Lions team. But actually, one of the things I think's always been a mystery to people who are analysts and people like that, because Acor's not a super outgoing guy, and he's definitely not the guy who's trying to do loads of interviews, is when we looked at him in all the Mad Lions teams, when he was in the first one, this Illian, he looked pretty good, but then maybe his level was just dropping a bit. Then in this team, he was like good here and there, and then obviously people know when he got his chance later on in Mouse, like it didn't look that great. Everyone flamed him, said he was bad. Right, what I've heard from behind the scenes from some of his in-game leaders is, like, even though to me, if I watch his POV, he looks really skilled, like he's so fast at firing, his movement's really nice. I've heard basically he's the sort of guy where it's like he doesn't have the mentality of like put it this way, people like Simple, the joke is you don't have to tell that guy what to do, he's going to go and do whatever he wants anyway, and his mentality the whole time is like, I want to take the fight, I want to take this angle. What I've heard basically, Acor's maybe a bit more like of a passive player, or maybe he wants the IGL to tell him. What would you say, like, what was it like working in a team with him?
I mean, I was super impressed with his mechanical ability. It has always, he has always been known in Denmark for having insane mechanics, and just seeing them live in practice and in matches were just crazy to me. That that he had this sick movement, but also these flicks with the orb. I mean, it was just, he kind of reminded me of Zerg in that way, where he was just, when he had his best period, where it's super fluid movement, sick flicks, and doing stuff that other orbers wouldn't be able to do. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, he had some some issues, but I think the problem were like not him speaking up about it, because I think he really enjoys playing aggressive, but I think he just didn't completely understood that he actually needs to do it, because it is an option just to play passive with the up, just hold, kill a guy who's coming into your angle, and that's like less stressful and easier to do. And the hard thing is to like actually take control of the game and actually going for these peaks. So I think he pushed himself too little and didn't like try to like be more aggressive than he were, and take more control. But of course he is a more quiet player, but I think at least in the new team in Gamer Legion, I think he has changed a bit, because I think he probably did the same as me, where he's like super tired of not doing what he knows he's able to do, and now finally it shows that a team that shouldn't like on the paper qualify for the major, like they do it, and he was like a big part of it, and he was playing super aggressive, doing crazy stuff all the time and showing like his mechanical ability on the server, and I'm just like super happy that he finally unleashes his potential. I just really hope that he keeps doing what he's doing, and sticking to that aggressive playstyle, because that's where he's playing his best for sure.
A lot of people right now in this moment are going to know who Huxley is, but they're only going to know either from G2, which is a mixture of like memes and some real play, or they maybe know like the other Copenhagen Flames lineups from the majors, etc. But obviously in this year, back in 2020, you played with them a bunch of times. You were in the Existence team together. You came to Mad Lions together. If you knew Huxley back then, who is he as an IGL? I've heard as an IGL, he's quite different to a lot of the other ones. He has like his own idea of how to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would say that we kind of helped each other when we joined in Copenhagen Flames, because he hasn't played with a guy like me who has a lot of ideas, and some of them might be crazy, and I have a lot of opinions about stuff. And I haven't played with an IGL who is that open and ready to listen and learn. So we are really good at giving each other criticism and explore how we would like to play Counter-Strike together. I mean, we would sit hours and hours on a server and just talk about, okay, how do we actually want to do stuff? We watch not all, but many practice games through together and seeing what we should do like differently. So I think I had a little impact on the way he calls that we kind of found out together, because I feel like the first 2 months I played with him, it was a bit rough, but after we learned each other like better, that he knows, okay, what do I like, and I don't know what he likes, and we kind of had some special bond about grinding together, because we will always sit after practice and do 2 or 3 hours of like theory, watching a demo, whatever, and we just became a duo, I would say, where I mean, I told him basically that he was like one of the best in-game leaders I played with, because I think he is really smart about the game, but the thing that was like different from most IGL is that he was so eager to learn and so eager to improve, whereas the other in-game leaders I played with, they were maybe a bit more confident and cocky in their own philosophies and styles, but he was actually like ready and able to like change himself to call better. And I think not many in-game leaders are like changing their whole style or the way they're calling in the middle of a season, kinda. But he's a person who likes to play default, just like Mike, to give like freedom to players, and also responsibility. So he likes to set up the game plan about around the default. So when we have got the map control, we can always find and execute that's like simple and easy to do. So it's not something where we have to save 4 or 5 Molotov, but quite easy, like 1 smoke, 1 flash, and it can be explosive. It can also be slow. Just simple variations where everyone can like contribute. I think you saw what do you call it? At the major with Flames, or the 2 majors they played in, that the style was like quite simple, but you can get a lot of it if you have like good players, because it's so default heavy, it's so simple, and you can do a lot of stuff with these calls.
Right, people are obviously going to know you come to Heroic not long after in the story. But what I want to ask was this: since you played in all these different teams, and sometimes it is with good players, it's teams that are on the rise, they're just never quite at the level Heroic was at. What actually do you think is the best period of your career individually? Like, if I asked someone, if I went to go look at the best refresh, was it in Heroic? Was it in years prior? What was like the perfect time for Heroic? I mean, for refresh rather.
Yeah, I think it was back when I played with Huxi. The couple of like the first 2 months, it was also because I have been on the bench for like 6 or 7 months, so I really had to like get in the groove again. But in that Copenhagen Flames lineup that later turned into Existence and Mad Lions, just that whole year where I played with Huxi basically, I think that kind of was like me like coming back to my form and showing, I can actually do a lot of damage, because I had the trust of the team, I had the space, and I had a lot of responsibility as the second caller on that team, because I tried to help Puxi as much as possible and being his sidekick kinda, like calling wise, and I think that's where you will get the most out of me, where I can explore and test all my ideas out, because I have a lot of ideas, and I think, at least personally, it's important for me to search and try to create new stuff, because that's where I play the best, where I can look at the meta right now, and I'll try to look at it and find gaps or ways you can do stuff differently. It could be pulling out a trick that you used to do like 2 years ago and try to use it again, or find something new on the server and test angles, test flashes, whatever, smokes. That's at least where I get to be this best, where I can be this creative and play with freedom and responsibility.
Does that imply that in Heroic you didn't do that as much? Did you get to have a voice in Heroic?
I mean, I did have a voice, but the thing is, of course, Cadian is the IGL, and the second caller was down, of course, and I mean, then there wouldn't be as much space to do it as there were on other lineups, where I was maybe the most experienced player, or the second most experienced player, where you actually wanted me to do it. But in this team, like, I didn't even want myself to do it, because I thought that, of course, Kane is the caller, and I really believe Stown was better at doing this than me, because I also remember in Fractures where he was doing it a lot. So I didn't even think, that the team would function better with me doing this. Maybe I would play better individually, but that's not important to me. So it's nothing to blame on the team or the players, but the roles in Heroic were not optimally for me individually.
The guy you joined Heroic with was obviously your former Mad Lions teammate Shush, and he's someone where, again, he hasn't had like a big name. In a lot of these teams, people looked at the Bobskis, the Acors, obviously in Heroic, there's all the other big names, right? It seems like in Heroic, though, he's really established himself. Like, a lot of people seem to respect his game now. Who is Shush?
I mean, Shush is a really stable and one of the least nervous players I've ever played with. I mean, he does really care. He doesn't really care who's meeting. He doesn't give a F about pressure or on a big stage. He's always super calm when you play with him, and like, he gives you this safety net where you always know what he's gonna do when you play like bomb sites with him. He's always super consistent, and it just makes it easy to play with, because you have the freedom with him to do your moves, because I played a lot of like bomb sites with him, and I had the freedom and the space to like do my moves or call something, because he's really good at just following and helping and supporting in that way for the other players. Or like on CT, you will see him play a lot of like anchor positions, and sometimes the rotators, they like to be hidden somewhere and be baited for. Maybe he has to support and play a position he doesn't like, but he doesn't really care about that. He's not a player who you can feel, okay, he's uncomfortable doing this. I feel like you can put him in whatever position and he's gonna get the best out of it. And I think he's like, at least when you look at all the Danish players, I think like individually he's like one of the most with rifle, like or like actually like in general aiming. I feel like he's like Denmark. He's at least like top 5 in aiming. But he doesn't really get the praise because the way he's aiming is just by anchor position and just spraying 2 people down. But it's actually really difficult to do what he does. And I have a lot of like respect for how he plays and the work he's putting in.
When you came to Heroic, it was a weird story if people don't remember, because the previous year the team had actually gotten really high up in the online period, but then they dropped off a little bit, and then they made the big roster move, bringing in you and Shush, and obviously they get really good again, won Pro League, etc. Like, what sort of a team were you joining? Was the implication by them making this player move that they had internal issues or something had happened with their style? Like, when you brought in, were you brought in with kind of an idea of like a specific role that you're going to play this way? How did that stuff work out?
Yeah, me and Rasmus, we were brought in with a purpose of doing certain roles, of course. Also, I think they kind of wanted an upgrade, or maybe not to become stale. So I think they had some issues before with the lineup where I'm not sure exactly because I wasn't there, but I think it was something to do with consistency, and they wanted more firepower. And I think, of course, they got that in Mirshus. And there were some clear roles that we had to fill. And I had to fill some lurker positions, and in general, not exactly the same playstyle as I had in Mad Lions. In Mad Lions, I had more X Factor, more freedom, where I could do more stuff. In my own way, but still in Heroic, as you know, the playstyle were really aggressive sometimes and wild, and it would look crazy. So it wasn't because I felt like, okay, I'm just sitting and holding an angle and not doing anything, because I was still active. It was just a bit different because it was a lot of CT stuff were like called by Cadian, and I mean we also had the opportunity to do so, but I mean just the way the whole team was set up was like. It felt like sometimes, and it was also a nice feeling that Cadian is like this master, and we were like his small puppets, and he could just move them around on the map. And sometimes we were like 5P, sometimes like we were like 5A if he had the feeling for it, and it was a bit crazy to play like that in the beginning, but I think pretty quickly we got the hang of it.
Obviously, the thing about Cadian is because he's the AWPer as well. People mainly are just looking at his frags and how did he do? Did he have a highlight round? Did he play well? But I actually think as an IGL in this team, like you're talking about, I think it's actually as an IGL he's established himself the best. Like, I actually get the vibe he could just be an IGL for many, many years to come, whether he's an AWPer or not. Like, what you're describing is one of the things I've noticed if you analyse the game. It's like the heroic style seems to be whatever he envisions as the heroic style. Like, he actually seems to have quite a good mind for the game. What do you think he's like as an IGL?
I think he's really he's trying to beat the meta in a way. Like for example, what would be a normal reaction for people is to, when they have some certain info, for example on Inferno, if they know, okay, 3 guys B, let's rush A, there's only 2 guys. This is like the most default reaction on Inferno, I think, and we would abuse these, default things where, okay, we know they're going to react A because we have shown 3 people on B. So let's stand in a setup with 2 guys where we know we are going to like kill at least, 3 or 4 guys. So the retake would be easy. And this kind of stuff where like we would prepare ourselves for these like default things where that would happen on the map. So we'd like, and then, the team after they have lost this round, they would probably say, we should just hit our shots. He got this lucky spray down. This shoot guy, he's so good, or whatever. But for us, we fully outplayed them because we knew what would happen, and we prepared ourselves for it. That we know, okay, we're only 2. They know we're only 2. They are probably gonna go fast and execute, and we would just have the perfect answer for it. So I think he's like really good at teaching this kind of stuff where you as player have to like it's your responsibility to read these scenarios and be able to know when like to read these reactions, because if you're playing, like for example, I was the guy playing short and Chris were playing apps, that we pretty quickly learned, okay, it's actually our responsibility to counter this reaction. It's not Katie's job to sit and tell us where to stand on A, because he's B doing some stuff and showing the up. So we kind of learned, by practice, making mistakes, playing games, that we have to like develop these reactions and these setups ourselves and take responsibility of our own positions, because this is what makes Heroic so good, that they are abusing all these small things that you would think is like normal or whatever, but it's actually like super strong to abuse these like default reactions. And just so people don't think I'm like telling the whole strat, like this is the most default thing
Sure.
I just explained, like rushing A, but it was just one example of hundreds.
Right, obviously, one of the things that makes Counter-Strike a very unique team game is because you die in the round and you don't respawn or something else, you get to watch your teammate. It means you were obviously watching like the rest of us when KD did that ridiculous round in Pro League against Gambit, right? So give me your thoughts. What did you think when it happened? Like, put it this way, if people don't know, what really makes that round amazing isn't as much like the kills. It's that like the starting weapon he has and the position. It should basically be impossible to win the round. In that scenario, you don't even think they're going to win at any point almost, right?
I mean, I think when he got the AWP, and I think he killed a guy swinging on the A side, and he was like in a 2v1. I think we all believed in it, because I don't know, for some reason he just shot a radar shot through Firebox and he tagged the guy behind it, and I was actually the only guy who heard that he hit him, because there's actually a sound where when you hit somebody like through a box, you can actually hear it, this sound or whatever.
Okay.
And I just like highlighted that you hit him, and he went for the second shot, and he managed to hit the wallbang too. And then it was in a 1v1 that was actually quite slow. I mean, it was kind of, what do you call it, really tense, because it was so slow, no one was making sounds, and then he jumped, saw him Tetris, and he won the round. So it was like a really intense round to spectate, because in the 1v1 that went on for like 40 seconds, and we really didn't have an idea where he was. Or actually, we actually said that it was Exile left, and he's usually the short player, and Kaden wasn't, he wasn't killed from short or connector or jungle, so we kind of assumed he was pushed T-spawn, and then he was, he ended up at Tetris. But yeah, it was a really crazy round to spectate, and a great way to win the tournament for sure.
Sure. One of the things I want to ask about with Cadian is, obviously, one of the things he is also really famous for is, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, he just celebrates like a motherfucker whenever any game is won that the camera's on him. Like, I make fun of him because it's just being mean. Like, my joke is, if he got a Happy Meal, he'd go, I've got a toy in it! There's a toy in here! But it's like, and everyone gets on me. So, but explain that to me. Explain to people, like, why is he like that as a person? What are we seeing when he does that?
I mean, what you're seeing is like a guy who is like, showing what the games means to him. Like he doesn't care if he's meeting tier 3 team or tier 1. For him, every game counts, and I can really like understand that, and it makes a lot of sense to me too, that it doesn't really matter who you're facing. You should always, celebrate for yourself and your own team that you are happy to win, and showing the same emotions that you would do to a top 30 team, to a top 1 team. Of course, it's always going to be a bit different when it's a top 1, but I mean, I don't really mind that he's going crazy by beating a top 30 team or a top 20 team, because I mean, in the end, it's a game is a game, and you can lose to everyone. So why wouldn't you, in a way, respect your opponents enough to show them that you care about winning? So, I mean, it can look a bit crazy when you're seeing it from the outside, but if you know the guy and you actually know what he stands for, it makes a lot of sense.
One thing I want to ask about is, I like when I did that analysis earlier where I gave him all the props as an IGL. The problem is, you'll notice, ever since Heroic got to the lands and didn't win the big ones and was still like a team on the brink and people thought you should have gone further and had more wins, he's obviously one of the people who gets critiqued because he's the AWPer, and in most teams, the AWPer's supposed to be like the best player, one of the best players. You notice at the end of the year, when they do those lists, there's tons of AWPers on there because they're getting all, like, if people don't understand the way the stats work in the game, I was almost biased to the AWPer because if he kills people, he doesn't take as much damage, so the kills go up, but the deaths remain low. Also, you save if you're the AWP. You know, there's a lot of reasons to why it happens. But anyway, he's obviously someone I would say gets a lot of criticism in Heroic in that sense, just as a pure AWPer. Obviously, people think to themselves, well, he's not Device, he's not Simple, he's not Ziwu, these guys, you know. What do you think on this topic? Like, is it something, it does his AWP game need to get better? Is he just the player he is now? Do you think that are people going too far with criticism? What's your take on that?
I actually think he's really skilled and especially a really smart AWPer. I think he's like one of the smartest. I just think that the jobs he has to do with IGLing and AWPing is like really, really hard. I mean, there's only been, one guy who has been really successful at doing it. I know Jamie is also doing it, but I mean, it's not to the same level as Fallen did or the same level that you expect Heroic to be in. And if only one guy was able to do it for, I don't know, 2 years or how long he has his good run as an individual, it just for me seems an impossible job to do perfect in both of them. And I can I can only say that I'm just impressed that what he's keep delivering, because it's really hard to be a IGL for sure. I've also tasted a bit of it, and of course, AWPing, you need a lot of focus and a lot of individual work to put in, and those two roles are kind of contradicting to each other. I feel like, because you have so much stuff to think about as the IGL, and so much more work to do as an IGL, but also as an AWPer. So I feel like he has chosen the impossible way to become the best, and I feel like he's actually kind of making it work, because whatever you can say about his own performance or whatever, he has still been great in the online era and also been really consistent in the LAN era. As a team, maybe I'm not sure about this, or I haven't looked at the numbers, but maybe his individual level is going up and down sometimes. But the team results were, to me, always super consistent, and I feel like that's the most important. Of course, would it have changed if he had the same numbers as Shiro or Simple or whatever? Maybe, probably, but I mean, you have to look at what the team is actually giving, and I think he's a big reason why.
Right, one of the weird things that happened to you during this time in Heroic was, even though all the stuff with Hunden and the coach bug and stuff, that was ages before you even got there. That wasn't even the lineup you were playing in. But I feel like people forgot that, because I saw actually, you even posted about yourself, you were getting hit as though you did it and you were involved in some way. So I have two questions here that are sort of connected. I want to answer them at the same time. One is, what was it like just being someone who didn't do any of that, wasn't involved, but sort of getting drawn into it? And then the other part is, I'm sure the one part that did involve you is you are part of that team though, and you're having to see your teammates go through all that, and you're also wondering at that time, if you remember, there was a really weird angle where it's even though plenty of other coaches, in fact most of the coaches used that fucking bug, and people literally cheated who didn't ever get the same hate and weren't called out in the same way, it felt also like I'll just say it, I always thought certain people, even maybe some of the Astralis players, because they obviously were focusing on this, I thought some of it was also kind of you call it in English sour grapes, they didn't like the fact that this team came up online and they thought they were just online as they're not like us, the land champions, and then they felt a bit salty, they cheated as well, because I think some people, when they heard that bug thing, thought, that's the whole reason they were winning, even though when you go and look, it was whatever, a few maps or something ages before. Did you get a sense of that? What was it like to be caught up in this storm?
I mean, first of all, it was just super weird that I kept getting accusations or getting told that you were involved in that stuff with your coach, and I was like, no, dude, I wasn't even there. I mean, it was 7 months later or something like that. So it was just a weird period where I felt like I had to repeat myself and keep saying the same to people, hey, I was not there, I'm not a part of it. And also, I think what made it worse was they just won Cologne online. and then the next day, 100 gets banned, and I think for that reason, that contrast made it like even I believed that Heroic cheated at Cologne because there was not the best explanations. It was just like, oh, he's banned for using the bug. Okay, then I just assume, okay, they just wanted Cologne. It makes sense that he used the bug, but he actually didn't even like use it there. So it's just a lot of things that's like unfortunate with the timings. When they win Cologne, when he's getting banned, and he became like the worst coach of them all, even though he didn't use it the most. And this hard Legion guy who used it so many matches that is even like ridiculous. Doesn't like no one is talking about this guy or even the Gambit coach even. So for me it was always a bit weird why Hunton got this extra hate, and especially like also the players and their organization. So it was always like a weird situation, but I was just so focused on the team and the exciting times that it kind of went by my head a bit, and I didn't have time to think about it because I wasn't even like involved. So personally, it didn't really matter to me, but I could feel on my teammates. It is for sure a hard period where like they're getting accused for stuff that isn't true and all this bullshit, and getting hate from maybe some of your former friends, and usually as a CS pro you get a lot of love from fans, but suddenly you become this villain. It's not that easy to do in such a young age. So I was at least trying to be a good friend to my team and try to help out if they needed someone to talk to, and stand by their side in a way. I also think that's one of the reasons we bonded as close as we did, going through this together in a way, where the rest of the world were hating on them, where me and Shoes were like trying to be good friends and support them.
What about though on the pro side? Because I did get the sense, look, publicly people like Simple and Carrigan were coming out and saying so, Robban, like legendary figures, and I also did get the sense, like as well because of the online stuff, but also it seemed like a lot of the other pros like just specifically hated Heroic, right?
Yeah, the worst part is you are mentioning Carrigan and Simple. If you go and look back at it, Carrigan were playing with Robban, who also used the bug, and Simple were also playing with Sterix, who also used the bug, and it's just it feels just a bit weird to me that people who actually were doing kind of the same. The problem is you can never prove that the coach didn't say some information that he shouldn't say, but I feel like especially those two players and in general many of the pros were like in the same situations, but they were saying stuff that for me didn't really fit in. They were just accusing and throwing it like out there on like social media, and I think that's really dangerous to do, especially when you kind of have fucked up yourself in a way. There's a Danish saying that you shouldn't throw with rocks when you live in a glass house. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, we have a similar saying in English. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I feel like many of the pros should try to be a bit fair and look at the bigger picture. I was also a bit surprised at some point where the coach of Furia, he had to play a stand-in event, and he played insane, but he just got like a lot of love from the community, and I think that's great. He's getting love, but it's just a contrast to what Heroic got, and that part is just a bit weird to me that they forget about some other coaches, and I feel like either you treat them all the same or you don't, or you like treat them good or you treat them bad, and I feel like it was a bit unfair what happened to Heroic.
Another part, it's why I set the interview up like this, is because there was all this drama and then the coaching thing, and then 2 different times Heroic's been really good, but it's online. I feel like what happened at that first LAN, the IM Cologne one, which people remember was like a studio LAN, that just made it look so that all the haters could be like, shit, I told you they weren't that good. But I actually think if you go and look at this tournament, it's way closer than people remember, because if you remember, the team you lost to was FaZe Clan in the quarterfinals, and this was the FaZe Clan that obviously was able to like beat the Gambit team as well. And also in this event, if people remember, that was the whole thing about FaZe Clan. They hadn't even been good online because they had all those like boomer players like Rain and Olaf and Carrigan. Their whole thing was like, look, if we get to LAN though, we're going to be really good again. We're all the great players from the past. Do you feel like that were they able to like use their experience against you? What do you think happened at this tournament?
I mean, this tournament were a bit chaotic in general, just because it was like 1 week before all this, leaked things with Hunt and Astralis like came out, and it was just a really weird period to play. We just lost our coach. He did some weird stuff that's like crazy to me, and also playing the first and like kind of like for me at least the biggest LAN, and you're doing it against FaZe, in the quarterfinals. It's of course you can feel now. Okay, now it's actually a different kind of Counter-Strike compared to the online one because you're not able to hear every footstep. You're not able to do the perfect rotation at the right up point of time. You don't have as clear communication as you have online, and it's just kind of a different game. But I mean, to me, it felt more real because sometimes I felt like when we were playing online, it felt like really easy to play sometimes because you could just be in your own little bubble and just play the Counter-Strike that you have practiced for so long and you know exactly what to do. But when you're playing LAN, it's way more chaotic, and then at the end of the round, you can hear a crazy guy yelling all the time. It's just a different vibe to it. But it's actually something I've missed because I played a couple of lanes with Factors, and I kind of miss, and I want also to play like the bigger lanes. But it was like an event where we felt like, okay, we kind of played bad, but it was also the first LAN, so we talked about it like after and also before the LAN that it is the first LAN. Let's not put too much pressure. Let's test run the team, see what we can do on LAN because it's been so long period without lanes that it's not fair to judge us like that hardly on the first one because clearly showed that we fucked up.
Right. One of the things that people might not know is when you went to that major, where obviously you guys made the semi-finals, which was a big result, right? The problem with that one is if people don't remember the game, what they're not going to remember is like, you could have won this game. Like there was actually a point in this game where you guys did a big comeback on Inferno. It looked like you guys were going to the final, not G2. Like everything was on your side. And then if people don't know as well, I always say this as well. Like if I'm a team that lost that game, like Nico was like on another planet that day, mate. Like he was just killing everyone. So like if you go take us back in this game, this must have felt like a game like if anything, if this is like you played out a movie in your mind, you're going to win this game. This is going to be like the epic comeback, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it started CT or T, but I just remember we made this big comeback on T where we just kept grinding out rounds. It was like a super close game, and I just remember at some point when we were CT, it was like Nico, he just made the sickest, entries. Like there was like 2 rounds where I'm like still in shock by like what happened. It's like he was like moving up short and executing A, and I think he just 2-tapped 2 guys, and just coming to the bomb side, and like A side was clear. And then at another time he was like jumping out of apps, and again getting huge 2 entries again, and those 2 rounds and many more of course. But that was like the ending of the game where he just entered us in a sick way and did like crazy stuff and like really showing us the real Nico. I mean, I think that's like one of the first times where I really got the what do you call it, the Nico treatment, where you feel like you actually play good, you actually did the stuff you were supposed to do, but this guy just does something out of this world. It was like crazy to see. I think he's like individually like one of the it was like one of the best rifle performances I've ever, played against, and it was not even, us like making mistakes. Like after the game, we had the feeling that we were the better team. Of course, they won, so they were better. But we felt like if it wasn't for these superhero rounds from Nico, that the game would have looked a lot different. Because he really, showed us that he has the experience, but also the talent for it.
Since you said it there, that is a question I want to ask you. Look, it's not ever going to be popular if you say something like, I think we were better. Or if you say, like, for example, obviously Na'Vi was #1 team and did win that event without dropping a map. But, like, here's the thing. I'll ask you the question. I always thought, because even though G2 did give them a great second map there, like, on paper, G2 was never supposed to be able to beat Na'Vi. Like, that team hadn't been a team that was winning. Like, if Heroic had played Na'Vi, Heroic always matched up well with Na'Vi. Even after this, before, like, that would have been the final, right? That would have been the map. Like, you would have had a chance potentially to beat them, right?
We would have a chance. I'm not sure how our emotions and the pressure would get to us in the final, because I think they would be more comfortable being a final compared to us. But of course, I mean, we always, I think there was only maybe one game we played against them that wasn't close, but I felt like every other best of 3 we played against them were like always 3 maps, always like double digits on all maps, and we were always having these close battles with Na'Vi, and we only managed to beat them once, at least one time. I mean, it has always been my fear that I would actually never get the chance to beat this iteration of Na'Vi with Boomich, and it was like, I think it was at the RMR, but yeah, I mean, if you would have met them at the major final, just to be humble, I think they would have won anyway. I think they were in a sick form. I think Bit played amazing this tournament, and Simple being Simple, and then you have, I mean, like every time Electronic is playing the third best on the team, then you know for sure that you have a chance to win the major and being the best team in the world when Electronic is the third best player, because I think Bit and Simple played amazing.
When after this, they had obviously now the infamous Blast 4 finals in Copenhagen, right? I have a few questions about this. So the first one is, so some people are going to know some of the other ones, but my first question goes like this. I remember coming into this event because you've just come off the major, and like at the time, you are the #1 team in Denmark. Like Astralis wasn't as good at the time. In fact, this is the first tournament where they made the swap for Blame F and Config, and obviously they've finally gotten rid of the era with the other players, right? When this tournament came along, I remember Cadian doing an interview. I think it was maybe even on stage, and he said what now are like famous last words, because he thought to himself, like everything I just said, like, wait a minute, we're like #1 in Denmark, like we're really good right now, we're better. So he really thought this whole crowd's going to be cheering for him and for Heroic, and it's going to be like sort of the moment. And obviously people will know when you played against them, like even though you're all Danish, no, it couldn't have been more biased. Everyone was just an Astralis fan, and it's almost like that mean thing people do in tennis sometimes, where like you're supposed to have like professional etiquette, but if they really fanboy one player in tennis, they'll even cheer when the other guy makes a mistake, which is a bit BM. It's not like, not like your player made a great play. You're just hating on him. The other guy, like, yeah, fuck you, like my player's better. Like when this happened, right, did you actually think the same? Did you think, we might get like the heroes welcome, we might get all the cheers?
I mean, I think I expected when we played against them that they would, boo for us, of course, and cheer for them. But the one thing that didn't make sense to me was like when we got like introduced.
They were booing you then,
like,
right?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, okay. I mean, we are not even playing the game, so I mean, it didn't even make sense to me, because like usually, the few stages I've been on, the crowd will always be, to some extent, like positive to and respectful to all the teams. But this was like straight up kind of weird, because like usually you would hear like this kind of yeah, and like these yells, but now you just hear people, booing, and it was just a completely different sound. I was not like used to at all. But we had a good time, like enjoying that, because for us it didn't really do much. We just used it as energy. I mean, if people boo or say yay, I mean, it doesn't really matter to us. There's still thousands of fans coming to see you play, and like to me that's just really motivating to like play in front of like such a crowd. But against Astralis it was just extreme. I don't think I will ever experience anything like that, because it was so crazy that even some of the players, tried to go out on social media and say, hey guys, this is not nice. Don't be, this, what you call it, one-sided, and respect all teams. And yeah, they kind of did like the same thing TAS did when they played against Fnatic,
Yes.
Yeah. But like, I think it would have a much better impact if, Glaive took the microphone and like said it like TAS, compared to doing on social media, because I think many of the fans is not even on Twitter, because it's just the families and small kids. I don't think they're usually like on Twitter. But yeah.
Right. Another thing was obviously Cadian, because you guys, listen, I get why he did it. Like, first of all, I've noticed with Cadian's style of being an IGL, it's almost like he is living out his fantasy of like, I'm on top now. Like, shit, I waited so many years for this. Like, I'm gonna really get the most out of this. And he does almost try to create like epic moments. That's why he does all the fucking speeches and these crazy celebrations. So obviously he did it. So like, if it was a movie, this is what you would do. You would say like, you know what, Astralis, like you've beaten us all these times, but this is the one that counts. This is for all the marbles, whatever he said, the bragging rights for years or something. Which obviously, look, now it's a meme because of what happened in the game, but at the time that sounded fucking epic. But my question was this, is I know Cadian was thinking that way, but what did you guys, did you know he was going to say something like that? Did it put pressure on you? What did you think of that statement?
I think always when Cadian is doing interviews, and especially when it's against Astralis, he's always going to say something crazy in some way, and always be a bit, on the edge and trying to like get into the heads and stuff like that. But I mean, like we always, just let him do his thing, and it was like kind of a battle he was doing on his own, because we were not, like I was not going out on stage and doing these kind of interviews. It was like always him, and for me, like that's fine, because it gives him some energy and some fire, and it just hypes him up even more for the game. And he even said himself that it helps him to have these small battles for himself, these small obstacles that he's like kind of actually creating for himself. So I think it's a really nice like motivator for himself, and if it actually had paid off, I think it would be really badass to do it that way.
Sure.
So, like for me, I don't really mind it. I think it's fun. It brings some flavor to the game that sometimes it is, a bit, not that fun. Like there is not that much, banter or like rivalry and trash talk, and I think if you do it in the right way, it actually makes the games like so much cooler to watch and even to play. So I think it's cool he's doing it, but it doesn't really matter like to me that much that if he's doing it or not.
If we go to the next major, the Antwerp major this year, this was another one where on paper people will look and go, oh, quarterfinals, yeah, it's not bad, like pretty good. Oh, you lost to Navi, well, they were really good, blah, blah. Like this is a game where, again, like this is like, that reminds me of the last major. It's like you're in the third map, it's going really well, and then all of a sudden, this time it was Electronic, who you referred to earlier, like Electronic just took over the game, like this is like another godlike performance, right? Like, you've actually been a bit unlucky in some of these majors, you could have gone further, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hate saying, we were unlucky, we just met, the wrong team. And like, I always have the, what do you call it, philosophy of, you can never blame the bracket or the system, because, I mean, if you're playing a tournament, you are playing it to win. And if you cannot beat the best team there, I mean, then what's the point? Because some team has to meet them in the quarterfinals. You cannot get the easiest run and then get to the final and then say, okay, I just lost to the best team. No,
Sure.
I mean, you have to beat them at the quarterfinals, all the finals. It doesn't really matter. But I think that game, we had our chances on Ancient. It was like a really close game, and yeah, there was like 1 versus 3 against Electronic. That was really stupid. We all peaked him 1 by 1. Again, so annoying to lose these kind of rounds. That's like actually pretty easy to play, but that's what happens. And when everything is on the line, and players like Electronic will punish your mistakes. And I mean, I think on the third map we didn't have a chance. Our nuke were looking rough at that point of time. And we kind of swapped roles in the middle of the tournament, so it wasn't, really a map we was that confident in. So like for sure, the best team won. And if I have to be objective, I really think they deserve to win, and they clearly showed it on third map too.
One thing I wanted to ask about at this point in time is, like, as you referenced there's a couple of times in your career you've been a part of, like, the wrong side of, like, could have won the game and threw it or lost the 1v3. But obviously a thing that you built your name with as well in this heroic team, online and offline, was being a clutch player. Actually, you've won, I mean, obviously people know the Liquid one was pretty ridiculous, but, like, you've had somewhere, it's like, if people get one of those in their career, that's a pretty good move. You've had, like, 3 or 4 or 5. I think it seems like you've had a bunch. So how do you, have you changed as a player in that sense? What is that a part of your game you think about?
I mean, I've always been really confident in playing clutches. It was something I had a great feeling to. I cannot really explain it, but it's just like I feel like I'm really good at isolating the duels and getting the 1v1s that I need. And I'm always, trying to surprise my enemy and playing them to win. I mean, just to I like to think about clutches a lot, and I remember watching Sipnix a lot when Astralis were having their best periods. It's like when I watch Sipnix, I feel like often he played them to punish people's mistakes. He's not like a super aggressive clutcher who's like out there taking space. But I mean, I really enjoy looking at different players and how they clutch and how I can put it into my own like clutch game. But what I really learned by him was like being patient and calm, because that's like really what you need in these like situations where you have to like think clearly and trust yourself. And I think if you like look at him as a player, I think that's like one of the his biggest strengths is being calm and collected, and just playing his game, because some of the clutches he has won, it looks so easy, but it's really like well played by him, because he's doing the right moves and just like super focused in his own areas. And it's something I put into my own game, being calm and collected and just isolating the duels. I think I'm more into like the more aggressive side, where I'm trying to take space and try aggressively to take the duels to control the clutch and not just let it play out, because I think players are getting better and better at playing these situations and just peaking together. So I feel like for example, that clutch, I just tried to like search as many duels as I could get and be like really aggressive. And because sometimes people have this tendency of playing safe, and when they do that, it's just to wait, and then they can all peek together. But if you don't give them the opportunity to sit and hide, then you actually can gain some advantages. And this is what I think I exploited against Liquid, because they were all like hiding on the backside of B, and it was just easy to go up and kill them, because they just waited for the A guy coming.
Right. One of the last tournaments you played when you were in Heroic was this Pinnacle Championship, which was a LAN in Sweden, if people don't know. And it actually had a pretty good prize money, if people don't know. It had 150k for first place. And it was mainly like low tier 1 or like some tier 2 teams, like Big was there and the Fnatic lineup. But obviously the key thing was, in the final, you got to play against Astralis and beat them and get the win. Like, I know it wasn't like the biggest tournament ever, but that was to be a pretty cool one. Again, like, that's it. It doesn't matter in the sense of the trophy. Like, it's not the major, but getting a win like that matters against a team like Astralis, right?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot, because the last time we lost to them was like at the Blast tournament, and the annoying part with that game is like, there's something I just hate seeing in esports. Is like when one team have played one best of 3 and the other team hasn't, and I just feel like it's such a huge advantage, just like mentally, because like nowadays, you are like preparing for a game. You're using maybe 2 hours like prior to the game to prepare what you're gonna do. Then you actually play the game that takes 3 or 4 hours, and it's just 5 hours of energy and focus you are just using, and then you have to do it again, compared to a team who's just fully rested and prepared. And of course, then they are not exactly sure a team to face. In this case, it would be us or Liquid. But I feel like having the advantage of being rested, where something we were really annoyed by that when we played against them, because we would like to have a game against Astralis where everything is on the line and it's fair terms to both teams. So like ever since that game, we like, if we wasn't already motivated by beating them, we were like really mad and angry by the formats. And like every time we met them from that on, I think we won. And I think it was just great to beat them, especially in the final where everything is on the line, and just show them who the better team were.
Right. Obviously, people are going to say like the stats were going bad for you at the time or whatever, but the timing of this kick seems really weird, mate. Because like, you just won that tournament, like the team was maybe even turning things around. Like, give me some. What was this perspective like? Did you know behind the scenes maybe you're going to get removed? Was it sudden? What happened?
I think the decision were taken before the event, but I was told after the event that it was going to happen. And like, of course, I had a period where I wasn't playing as good, but I think that's like a result of me not being, a place where I'm happy as a player, because I really like the persons on Heroic and the management, and we were all like great friends and kind of a family. But as a player, it's just been really stressful not being able to, spread out your wings and do your best as a player, and feeling a bit limited by the roles. It's something that has caused me some stress and annoyed me for a longer period of time. In the short run, it would be fine, but in the long run, where you keep thinking, man, I really want to do this, or I want to change this, and it's just something you can't really do. It's been really hard for me. So that period, I've had some stress issues and also some confidence issues that clearly showed on my game. It clearly dropped for sure. But the timing was weird. But it's actually one of the things where many people are like, coming to me, oh man, I'm so sorry getting kicked. It's not fair and this kind of stuff. But I was actually, happy to get kicked from the team, because it kind of, motivates me for the next journey, because I learned a lot in Heroic. We had good results, but I didn't fit in as a player, and it is what it is. And I just really want my next place to be, something where I can really, show off who I am and be myself, and not, compromise on anything. Like, even though it would be a step up or whatever, I would always, having the importance of being who you are on the server as well, because that sometimes has been a struggle in my career. That's when I think of the team instead of myself, that in the long run is like hurting me. And I think that's one of the factors, is like embracing who I am and the things I can do and cannot do.
Right, after this, obviously, now people know you're in Sprout. But I think the detail people might not know, because they'll know you qualified for the major and all this jazz. So I was looking up the results before, and I was like, what the they weren't even doing that well online. What the fuck? They're losing all sorts of teams. So, like, coming into this RMR, did you know it was possible to qualify? Was the team in good form? What was the story?
I mean, we actually had really good practices up to the RMR, so I was like confident that we had like good chances of doing it. But I mean, if you look at the results, there's like many lower level teams we lost to. I mean, it's not because they are bad. Or like we lost to like Bad News Eagles, like they're not a bad team. They also qualified for the major. Then we lost to Sao, the Portuguese guys, and also some other teams too. I can't remember them all. But the thing I saw in those games were like, I think we were not playing our best. I think we were like not focused enough. And I felt like at the RMR, everyone gave 100% of themselves and really showed okay, we can actually play as a team. Because I have some young guys on the team, and sometimes these guys, they're just thinking, okay, I just have to go kill now. I want to kill Surrey. I want to just I want to fuck these guys up, because they believe they are better, but they are better. But when they play in this way, people are like punishing their mistakes, and when they get one kill, they're trying to get the second, and they just get traded. And sometimes they're not even getting the first kill, because they're just playing too aggressive and without respect. And I think that's what happened in those games where we are not playing as a team enough, and that like hurt us. And also, to be honest, I feel like it's easier to it was easier for me to call at the RMR compared to online, because I could see my teammates like next to me. I could feel the energy. They were listening to me better, and everyone were just more focused at the RMR compared to these online games. So we have a struggle in practice and online games. But at least what I remember from the boot camp, where we played the qualification for the RMR, where it went super clean, and also this RMR, like whenever we are like in the same room and I feel like everyone is more focused, and I think these young guys sometimes they have a struggle to focus when they're sitting in their own bedroom and just playing, and it's not the same motivation to like go and win.
Since for this team, I mean, you announced it yourself when you joined, you've taken on the role of being the in-game leader, like fully on, not just even a secondary call, like you said in past teams. Is this something like, are you doing it specifically for this team and this lineup? Is it actually something you want to do just going forwards in your career? You're going to be an IGL from now on?
I mean, you can never know what's happening in the future, but I mean, it's something I've actually thought about for some time doing it, because I've always felt like, as you know, I've played with many different teammates, many different IGLs, so I've like learned and seen the pros and cons from every leader I've had throughout my career, and I feel like I've learned a lot from them, but also learned what not to do. So I feel like I've had the perfect opportunity to be an in-game leader, also because, as I said earlier, I like to be creative. I like to come up with ideas and try stuff out, and use a lot of time on the server or like demos or rewatching like practice. So I've always had the dedication and also the drive to be like a mini in-game leader, kind of, and now, like in the player break, I was looking through all the offers and thinking a lot. Okay, what do I actually want? Because I could have for sure signed with a much bigger team and maybe compromise a bit with myself as a player, but I was not willing to do that again. And I was just looking, and it was actually me who contacted Sprout and were like, hey, because I was just looking at the HLTV list of all the teams, and I was trying to envision myself in one of these teams. And for me, Sprout was like the place I wanted to be. One of the reasons where is like Barry, he's like the coach. I've had many talks with him before joining, because I've always had a good friendship with him. And in the period where I was like on the bench, I played with him for 6 months. Back in 2019 when I was on the bench from Optic. So I've learned a lot from this guy, and I know he used to be a really good in-game leader, but now he's a coach, of course. I've always had a lot of respect for him, and I wanted a place where I could be the in-game leader I wanted to be, and he is a really good teacher. He has learned me a lot of stuff, and I wouldn't have done it at another place where he couldn't, teach me and help me the way I needed it. Because I think he's a huge reason why we had success at the Arma, and also helping me in calling. So for now, I think, I'm trying this out, being in-game leader. It's something I'm enjoying right now. It's easy to say on such small amount of time. So I know that's a factor too. The first 3 months might be easy, but maybe not the next 6. So I'm just taking it day by day and see how it's going. But it is something, so far I'm planning to do for a longer period of time. If it's gonna change with a big offer coming from another team or whatever, and I'm becoming the second caller, I mean, that's not gonna be, something I wouldn't say yes to. I mean, I would be open to like change roles again. But it has to be the right one for sure. And for now, I really like being in-game leader because I can do whatever I want to do basically, because I'm controlling the team. But I'm also like learning a lot and making a lot of mistakes. So it is a process that's like really new and exciting to me.
Do you hope at a future LAN, maybe the major, you play against Heroic and call against Cadian?
I mean, I think it would be a crazy game. Of course, I hope we are gonna win. But I mean, like even to this day, when I'm watching them play, it's like I can just recognize how they're playing and just predict what they're gonna do. I mean, it makes sense. I played with them for a long time. I know how they think. So I think for sure it's gonna be an advantage to me, because I think like they're even gonna like lose a lot of rounds due to them overthinking. Like I remember at least at practice, of course it's just practice, but I just remember them losing a lot of rounds where I'm like, what is even happening? Because like I remember we were like saving, and they are just running into the stack where we were like about to save, and then I don't know, like I don't know if that was because of me or they just had a weird practice round. I mean, that's fair. But I think it's gonna play to my advantage that I have a pretty good idea of what they're doing.
Since you mentioned in this team, there's a bunch of young players, up and coming talents. Like the one that everyone was raving about to me is obviously the Danish player. And I know it's impossible to sell these names, but like Stair or whatever they say his name as.
Yeah.
Right? Who is this guy then? Is he the truth? People, everyone's saying like this is the guy. Like, watch out for the next few years. He's going to be in the top teams and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely by far, the youngest and most, complete player, I would say. If you compare to his professional career, because he's only played professionally since the beginning of this year. And I think this guy, he's the most complete player I have ever played with. If you take into account how long he has played, because he's so smart about the game, and he's individually really good too. Of course, he's a young aimer too. But the thing that's really good about him that sets him apart from the other guys is he's really good at communicating, and he can actually do a lot of secondary calling, and that's just super impressive to me. That he's 18 years old. He has played professionally for 6 months, but he's probably playing he has done it for 2 or 3 years, and he of course there's still some stuff he needs to work on, because he is still a young kid, and I think he has a lot of room to improve. And I'm only saying it because I think he can become one of the best Danish players in the history. I think he could. I think in the long term, maybe not right now, but I think he could even, surpass Stavn, for me, with the stuff he's doing, and the potential he has shown me so far is really impressing to me.
At the end of this interview, do you have a final message you want to give to people? Do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to?
Not really. But I think the only thing I want to say is thank you for everyone who's supporting me, because it must be weird to support me who's changing teams all the time. But I do have some really nice fans and people who always believes in me. The only thing I want to say is I really hope you guys stop soon to blame Heroic or whatever for this switch, because I see it just everywhere. It's a mistake or whatever, but I really want to move on from that and start a new chapter for my career. So that's the only thing I would say. If people, they should just stop saying this. I mean, I know the internet is not gonna stop, so I don't know even why I'm saying it.
Okay, tusind tak.
Tusind tak.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Hades GOUD, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Ord, Pacy, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Thooorin, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question in one of those monthly AMAs where sometimes I roast people? Do you want teasers to find out who the guests are for upcoming shows and interviews I'm doing? Maybe you want to be part of one of those cool, lengthy esports discussions that I have. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing to you, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? Via the Patreon link in the description box below.